Women can feel that it is affirming and lovely for a 6'2" handsome man with a Patek Philippe watch and crisp white shirt to approach them in public. But a less attractive man making a carbon copy approach can be contextualized as exercising a dated masculine presumption to be able to impinge upon a woman in public.
Yo, what is going on, guys? It is Taylor the Fiend back again, and today we are taking a look at the damage caused by modern feminism. Don't forget to leave your thoughts and your comments. Make sure you check out the members area down below if you are interested in more weekly videos and supporting the channel. But otherwise, let's just jump right into the video.
Progressive white women imagined that when feminism enabled them to meaningfully take the cultural reins, their vibe of emotional intelligence and social justice inclusivity would put everything in a better state. What we've learned, after a decade or so of media cheerleading and endless fretting about toxic masculinity, is that women, and progressive white women in particular, are just as bad as men, and don't really have all the answers.
Feminists legitimately thought that they were morally superior to men. They based it off of assumptions, out of context statistics, and their feelings to say that they were better in every possible way. Then all they do is spew out hateful rhetoric and get praised for it. Great stuff.
We had empowered girl boss characters on screen, and it didn't work. The result wasn't a brave new world in entertainment, but declining viewership and cultural fatigue where everyone's afraid to admit they're bored. We tried body positivity, and it didn't work, and no one was genuinely into it, and it's lost cultural legitimacy.
I'm disappointed in your species.
And we tried pronouns in bio and unfettered solidarity with the trans community, and it didn't work, and respected institutional higher-ups pulled the brakes on it, and the spike of college students identifying as trans or non-binary has fallen away.
The reason why it doesn't work is because people are sick of being told that they are the problem simply because they exist. They pushed nothing but anger towards a group of men who didn't do anything wrong, and it was completely absurd and had no place in modern society.
And we tried more inclusive, empathy-based attitudes and practices in gaming, and it didn't work, and only alienated the existing fan base and brought forth ridiculous memes and contrived ideas and commercial failures. And now we're trying white chick book talk fiction out as a cinematic aesthetic. This is already terrible. The way Academy Award winner Emerald Fennell gets under the skin of intellectuals and cinephiles should be studied. She's a provocateur operating at the highest of wuthering heights, and it drives them insane, and I absolutely love it.
When a feminist says that something drives people insane, it usually means the opposite. Nobody's angry about this crap, nobody has time for it, everyone is exhausted from over a decade of this garbage, and that's why nobody is tolerating it anymore.
Love it. Some private school kid making immature edge slop doesn't equate to being an insightful countercultural girl boss moment. Anytime you love a piece of art for how it makes other people react, you're demonstrating that you don't know much about art.
Well, I've been internalizing a really complicated situation in my head.
Most of all, we tried expanding female empowerment while also maintaining some of the old norms that are advantageous to women in a kind of socio-cultural pick and mix, so that attitudes that are deeply toxic and undesirable in men are now being validated and repackaged in women.
Feminists would be nothing if it wasn't for their double standards. They blamed men for being angry and violent, yet these women get angry at the drop of a hat and salivate at the idea of being able to hit men for no reason. They are emotionally unhinged to a dangerous degree, in my opinion.
A narrative that set in was that when men don't date, it's because they're retreating from intimacy. When women don't date, it's because of emotional labor. Men couldn't legitimately be frustrated and burnt out by scrambled messaging, elevated expectations, contradictory or hypocritical gender and dating paradigms. As Chris Rock once said, only women, children, and dogs are loved unconditionally. A man is only loved under the condition that he provides.
And what that man is expected to provide is getting more and more ridiculous by the day, and a lot of women feel that they have the right to shame men for not meeting their absurd standards.
Something. Women can feel that it is affirming and lovely for a 6'2" handsome man with a Patek Philippe watch and crisp white shirt to approach them in public. But a less attractive man making a carbon copy approach can be contextualized as exercising a dated masculine presumption to be able to impinge upon a woman in public, where she has a right to not be pestered. So, of course, there is now a widespread reticence among young men to approach women or attempt to flirt, because there is a considerable likelihood they will be made to feel they are being creepy.
Modern women only want one type of man approaching them, and that is the man that they are highly attracted to. Average men are seen as the evil men who must atone for the sins of the guys who didn't actually want her.
In the cultural discourse, it is never brought up that women have any responsibility for the development of these gender models. It is only ever narratives of male diffidence and retreat, masculinity that is simultaneously toxic for being too in her space and too aggressive, and masculinity in crisis for being incelish, removed, and keeping distance. 66% of men under 30 are single. They aren't all giving up. Many are opting out of a transaction that no longer makes sense, and where the center no longer.
Men checking out of dating was pretty much inevitable at this point. You can only treat a man like garbage for so long until he says enough is enough and just goes and does his own thing. And naturally, those very same men who are tired of being treated like crap are getting the lion's share of the blame.
Holds. Men want sex, intimacy, validation. Porn gives them a low-risk, low-cost simulation of it. Women want attention, resources, reassurance, desirability. Social media gives them a low-risk, scalable version of it. When you can get a diluted version of what you want more cheaply and more safely elsewhere, you stop entering the higher risk exchange, so relationships decline.
What makes it so much worse is when men say that they want those things, modern women lose their minds and say that they don't owe men anything, but those very same men owe them the stars, the moon, and designer handbags.
Prevailing social attitudes, set in place by and affirmed by women, have drastically reduced the amount of suitors online and in real life willing to engage with them at all. Cake and eat it to feminism and elevated standards come across as too much of a headache. And, it should be noted, the current discourse swirling around about men dating much younger women ignores the hypocrisy of a proliferation of mainstream media celebrating older women with much younger guy romance.
That double standard is disgusting. If an older woman gets with a younger man, she's reclaiming her femininity and healing and getting what she wants, but a man doing that is seen as a monstrous predator. Make it make sense.
Again, it's a clumsy, glitchy sense that women should be able to have it all. And even if there are contradictions, well, men had it all for so long, so why shouldn't women sassily get their share of everything?
It don't matter. None of this matters.
Even the inherent nature of gender itself has been discombobulated by progressive white women. The logic is that women are more emotionally mature than men, able to strike deeper registers of empathy and nuanced feeling, or at the very least emotional registers that are different to that of men and off-limits.
Unfortunately, a lot of modern women act incredibly emotionally immature, childish, and go out of their way to be, or at least to try to be victims anyway, and they have the nerve to say that men are the ones being immature for not actually wanting them.
To them, and which are inherently feminine, and which are bold and undeniable, whilst also fragilely susceptible to being quashed and overridden by men personally and professionally. While at the same time, inherent femininity is also questionable as a concept when it comes to gender studies ideology and allyship with the trans community, which depends on the idea of gender being socially constructed and not innate, because if it were innate, it would call into question the legitimacy of changing from one gender to another, while at the same time, once the transition has taken place, all of that no longer matters because the transitioned person is now authentically the alternate gender, which means, depending on the hour, the mood, or the outfit, gender can be either inherent or socially constructed.
It is nothing but a rampant series of contradictions that modern women use to try and justify their behavior. Everything is men's fault regardless of the context, and any holes in their logic can just be blamed by, blaming the patriarchy or something.
For 50 years, Scandinavian countries tried social constructivism, that gender differences in behavior, career choices, and personality traits are largely or entirely the result of socialization, not biology. And if you eliminate the social and institutional pressures shaping people into men and women, you should, in theory, see more gender convergence. What actually happened was the opposite. The more egalitarian the society, the more pronounced the gender differences became.
You can't blame society for everything, but that doesn't actually stop feminists. Society is just this evil construct that only exists to hurt their feelings, so therefore men are always to blame.
But despite the jury being in, government advisory boards and developers of school programs to address misogyny and violence among young men, and UK cabinet ministers who watched that show Adolescence, still have the belief that young men aren't struggling to regulate their inherent masculinity, but that their masculinity is just outdated performative roles they feel pressured to.
Masculinity was seen as inherently toxic, but they never once tried to explain what masculinity was, only what it wasn't, and when they finally got around to explaining what masculinity should be, they went with Pedro Pascal, because of course they did.
Inhabit, and that such roles and behavior ought to be deconstructed to bring forth the more authentic, sensitive, emotionally attuned young man within. You know, the ideal types you see as characters in films and streaming shows who are drearily benign and pussyish creations of writers' rooms populated disproportionately by progressive white women. In the minds of Los Angeles-based screenwriters in their 20s and 30s, what they're offering is a kind of emotional upgrade for men. The classic traits that used to delineate a cool guy from a tedious one, dry wit, self-containment, a sense of danger or magnetism, are replaced by bland conviviality. So, instead of school programs where guest speakers visit boys at a formative age, and the boys, having strong role model receptivity, make relational connections to the speaker who has practical, real-world experience and achievements, as an athlete, or entrepreneur, or musical artist, or veteran, who could get through to them quickly and even have them avidly interested and challenge their conceptions of Andrew Tate and others.
Even when men conform to this so-called feminist ideal, they still get treated like crap anyway. They preach one thing, but they still demand dudes like Chad commit to them.
It will instead be middle-aged women with names like Trish and Joan and Debbie coming into the classroom with their PowerPoint presentations and their big bums and faffing for ages with the cable connecting their laptop to the projector, and having to ask an obliging boy in the front row to sort it out for them, and making some sort of mild impression on the kind of generic, unthreatening boys, and annoying the hell out of the more independent boys with braggadocio and a sharp ear for bullshit who such modules are supposed to be aimed at.
Young boys had no chance when this would happen. They were pretty much bombarded with this propaganda at home, school, and in entertainment. There was no escaping it, and they were brainwashed into buying this nonsense.
The idea that girls could be at fault in any way is disregarded. In Children, Violence and Vulnerability 2024, the UK Youth Endowment Fund reports 57% of boys who said they'd been in a relationship in the last 12 months reported experiencing at least one violent or controlling behavior from a partner versus 41% of girls. Physical and controlling behaviors including partner went through phone or social media, 37% of boys to 23% of girls. Afraid to break up, 31% of boys versus 20% of girls. Sexual coercion, 25% of boys versus 15% of girls. And hit, kicked or shoved, 27% of boys versus 12%.
Violence, coercion, and fear are all symptoms of an abusive relationship, and even though the statistics are higher for men and boys, feminists will still look at those boys and ask them what they did to make their girlfriends so angry.
Of girls. In teenage culture, jealous monitoring by girls is often framed as concern, anxiety, or emotional investment. When girls go through phones, it is often socially rationalized. He probably cheated, or he's just insecure. For most of the last decade, young men were widely diagnosed as a social problem. They were said to be emotionally immature, empathy deficient, hostile to progressive values, and resistant to the moral arc of history.
Men were accused of pretty much being the source for every single problem that humanity had to offer, even though the vast majority of men had nothing to do with those problems at all.
That attitude now looks increasingly wrong. What was framed as immaturity now reads more like instinctive caution. What was dismissed as bigotry increasingly resembles common sense resistance to abstraction, pretense, and institutional overreach. This matters because the institutions that insisted young men were wrong have themselves begun to retreat, revise, and quietly concede ground. Gender ideology has not marched forward unchecked, it has stalled, and in some cases reversed. Young men were not rejecting empathy or fairness, they were rejecting a politics that treated disagreement as moral failure.
When you have an ideology that has such a crystal clear with us or against us mentality, you can't be surprised when men realize that they want nothing to do with it.
When told they were on the wrong side of history, they chose not to argue, they opted out. Men are now a clear minority in arts and humanities degrees across the Western world. This is usually framed as a male deficit, a failure of curiosity or empathy, or evidence of creeping Philistinism. In reality, it looks far more like rational adaptation. The contemporary humanities offer weak economic returns, little institutional prestige, and a strong expectation of ideological conformity.
We all know those degrees are completely worthless. That is why men don't even bother dealing with them anymore. It's a waste of money and does nothing to actually make men's lives better in any way.
For most of the 20th century, literature sat at the center of the cultural conversation. It attracted young men because it promised risk, prestige, rebellion, and intellectual authority. That energy has drained away. Publishing, literary agencies, and cultural gatekeeping are now dominated by a narrow demographic and ideological profile. 78% of literary agents are women, most notably progressive white women. And there's no longer a literary cultural zeitgeist.
When you take into consideration that literature has been taken over by a combination of feminist garbage and just actual slop, you can't be surprised that men just want nothing to do with it anymore.
The key term, one that progressive white women could never psychologically accept because it sounds like such a quintessentially male flaw, is they have been guilty of hubris. They assumed their emotional intelligence and unfettered sexual empowerment and rising presence in the writing room and dominance of literature and identitarian activism would all be enlightening and positive. Well, ladies, we gave you a little go. It hasn't worked out. Let's move on.
Feminists did a lot of damage to our society as a whole, and it led to the point where there's just a massive divide between men and women, and they are now only starting to reel it back in some of the laziest ways possible. If you would like to get early access to videos, weekly lectures, and case study breakdowns of human behavior, make sure you check out the members area link below in the video description. Otherwise, make sure to click on one of these videos on screen now if you enjoyed. Make sure you take care of yourself, and I will see you in the next one. Peace.